all these mailmen carrying all this shit around is all right within this system. But this system has fear. I don't want you reading my mail. Why don't you want me? Why is it that I don't want you reading my mail? Because when I write sweet nothings to my girlfriend and call her itchy coo and all that sort of thing, he said, hey, listen, my friend. But he's got an itchy coo letter too, you see? So the trouble is, we develop an esoteric language and we don't want everybody to know about it because we feel a little self-conscious and we feel dishonest about those letters. We feel a little ashamed of the way we write. So we have been brought up in a society that seals the mail. You know, you bring up kids in a glass shit house, you know, when it's all glass and all the toilet bowls are glass and the turds are photographed while they're coming out. There's no kid that's going to be self-conscious. You know what I mean? This kid could shit in a glass bowl on a stage at the Shrine Auditorium. It wouldn't bother if he's brought up that way. And we keep saying, is there nothing private? You know what I mean? And certain things that should be private, we all feel. Well, you know, when you go to a doctor, he looks up your asshole and says, how long you had that green blotch under your tongue, you know what I mean? Then he looks in your asshole and says, my God, that's a nasty cyst. Then he looks into your vagina, he sticks his finger up your ass for your male and presses your prostate gland. And all that area, you come in, you surrender your privacy immediately. Isn't that interesting? You walk right in, you bend right over, and bingo, your privacy is gone. Because we accept yielding our innermost concept under certain circumstances. If you know, then, what I'm referring to, when we use the word in the future, people keep asking us these questions. What about privacy? Will it be sacred? Well, that's a strange question because the people of the future don't have the same concepts. And all I meant to say now is that we do yield our concepts of privacy. Is there any question about that aspect? Now, there are some women and some men that have been able to do this. They've been able to appear on television. I'm talking about young women. And there's a doctor lifting up their tit and squeezing it to show you how to detect cancer. There's a public film that goes on. Well, in that area, the person will be respected a great deal. But if you just display your tits, it's like that. That's pornography. You see what I mean? Right, now, the whole idea, I can sit back on a chair and show you my pile-laden asshole for a medical magazine, but not in Time or Newsweek. On the cover of Newsweek, it becomes something else. But I think that the Newsweeks of the future will have whatever they need to have on the cover. I don't think anybody will say, my God, get a load of this shot. I don't think anybody would pay attention to it, because doctors don't. If they're in it long enough, you know. Maybe in the early stages there's some reaction. So privacy, revealing your innermost and most private thoughts, people had abused in the past. I mentioned this before. I mean, if you told me your father was a habitual pickpocket who spent 3 years in prison, and you just matter of fact tell me about your father, it is that sometimes when Richard annoys me, I go out and say, well, that guy his father was a pickpocket. And so I use it against him. That's why we do not reveal our innermost secrets, because people that we've known abuse that. But the future people will not be like that, and therefore there'll be no need to cover yourself when you run across the room nude, you know. People do that. And so you got to remember where it comes from. And when somebody says, will there be any privacy in the future, I always say the utmost. Now, here's what that means. It means, privacy means that no one will invade your personal life nor abuse you. But whether they can see your ass hanging out or not, they don't give a shit. If you run through the room with your ass hanging, nobody cares. Because they're not brought up to comparative anatomy. Because in Italy, they don't say, look at the size of that guy's nose. You know what I mean? In other words, they don't place a priority on that. So the future will not place a priority on those things. So the thing that you've got to understand, in order to operate any kind of a system, you have to control all those variables. If you bring in to a system the concept of privacy, then you talk about where the concept of privacy is to be violated. Well, then you get into the rights of men and the rights of individuals. You get into law. Then you get into psychiatry. The psychiatrist says, you ever piss in bed or shit in bed? Because many times. Did you ever take fecal matter and rub it on a mirror when you were in school? You know, whatever the hell it is. Is that a private question? Well, no, the guy was visiting a psychiatrist. Now, he says, is a psychiatrist a man's best friend? He says, no. The psychiatrist will write about you taking fecal matter and putting it on the mirror. Only says Euripides Sneed or Client D used to rub in the Journal of Psychiatry. So you run into a lot of problems on exactly what is privacy. And if there's a file on you, and the police have a record of your lousing up an area, then there are employers that can get that kind of information on you. I think they can just about get any kind of information that you've ever released on yourself, anybody. So it's a great idea to release a lot of misinformation on yourself. I think it's a great idea. I used to do this years ago. I used to tell a guy that I'm very much interested in the Nazi Party. In fact, I've been to many American Bund meetings. This is true. And I've been to communist meetings, socialist meetings, and I've been to the atheistic groups, the free thinkers, the Unitarian Church, the Jumpers for Jesus. And the guy said, you know, what are you interested in? And so if you do that, you get them loused up real bad, because in your record it says that, you know, you have sympathy for criminals, you don't recognize murderers, and in some instances you despise murderers. You know, get it all out, every which way, and they don't know where to find you. They really don't know what to do with you. Either you're such a free thinker, or you're not a person of convictions. And that becomes very difficult in a fascist state to identify you. If you can speak out in many, many ways about many things. If you can say, I think fascism had some excellent points, and some old Jew stands up and says, the way they packaged food was terrific. And you keep listening for you to come at something related to the Jewish people. Do you see me? And he doesn't hear that. And he sits down. Then you say, and I like what they did in relation to the Negroes. And the colored man stands up. They found out that the melanin can reflect a certain amount of light within a certain amount of time. And when there's a white man, you know, if you did it, nobody gets mad if you talk about that kind of thing. All right, so the idea is to learn not to be classified, because a lot of people would like to classify you. All right? So you belong to an organization called a non-classified organization. So you're not classified as anything. All right, we get through the systems approach again. We come into the question which you're bound to run into at schools or any place you're at in the future during the innovative periods of our social development. They're going to ask you this question. What will the rights of an individual be? And the question really is, what can the rights of an individual be? And what they call an individual, what can they be? He says, suppose I want to fly around the world at 40,000 miles an hour in a space capsule. I'll say, well, let me tell you how many space capsules there are and how many people would like to do that. And so, if you apply for it and you're capable of standing those forces, it will take about 11 years to get to that point. You see? So, there are certain things that you can't do within this limited state of technology. But as you go on into the future, almost any request can be fulfilled. But I wonder if you're able to accept the idea that privacy might be eliminated, because at present it could be a dangerous and an embarrassing thing. I also mentioned in a sane society, if and when we ever attain world government without any kind of technical elite or people under special privilege, only at that time do I believe that everybody's fingerprints and everybody's identification should be filed in some central bureau. And like I said, that little button that you wear when you go into the library, it records your entry at a given time. When you go to the barber shop, wherever you go, it records your entry automatically. So when somebody accuses you of having pushed some little child into the river or something like that, there's no court of law. They just press recovery of information Wednesday, 4 o'clock. This is you're at the music center and the guy's out. No more witnesses, no more of that shit. So there are many ways to identify a person. Not only that button, but facial scanning, weight as you step on transducers. You know, there are many ways. Color of the eyes, solid image of the head. So they will do multiple scanning just in case there's some indication at the medical center that your brother-in-law needs a transfusion or somebody close to you. They can touch with you instantly because you're known. Wherever you're at is always known. Now, Richard might say, well, just a minute, I don't want that much surveillance. I would rather just be an individual and be able to get lost occasionally. Well, we like the idea of you walking through the woods with a small telecommunicator. So if you go down in a cave exploring and nobody knows where the hell you're at, they just tune in on that frequency and they can tell you fell into a cave or you drowned in a lake instead of half the community looking for you. This is the reason. And the only reason I approve of that kind of surveillance would only be on the world government, only after all of the resources of the earth belong to everybody, no private ownership, no position of differential advantage. Until that day, I would be very much against any surveillance of anyone. I would distrust it. I'm just giving you my views in that area. And I'd like you to understand under what conditions surveillance would be part of a systems orientation. Any questions there? There may be some questions that bother you.